Theodore. He's a tugboat and a friendly tugboat too. A friendly tugboat too. Oh, Theodore likes to do the things that friendly tugboats do. Pushing and a pulling in the great big harbor, in the great big world is so much fun. So many brand new things to discover. Waking with the sun, gotta get the job done. Oh, Theodore and Emily, Foduck, Hank and George, and the harbor master too.
Prepare to turn, ordered George.
Preparing to turn,
answered Theodore. Theodore was helping George dock a big cargo ship. Slow down, called George. Slow down. Slowing, called Theodore. George whistled a big George whistle. It always felt great being in charge and telling everyone what to do. Start pushing, he commanded. George sure is being bossy today, thought Theodore. At last, the ship was safely at her dock. Theodore took a deep, happy breath. Now came his favorite part of working with George. Let's go home, shouted George. George's last order of the day.
So George is being his normal bossy self, I see. No shocker, since he's always the one to give out the orders. I seriously don't know how the other tugs put up with it. That would literally drive anyone crazy. Seems like working with old George is a lot harder than the actual job itself. So after the ship was safely docked, the two tugs were on their way home when the harbor was suddenly alarmed by Foduck's emergency siren.
And sure enough, Foduck was steaming towards the tugs, making his most important face. I believe I've located something beneath the harbor, he announced. What did he say? Said George.
I think Foduck said he found something under the water, explained Theodore.
You see, sometimes Foduck uses very large words. Let's go, ordered George right away. And off he roared, followed by Foduck. Oh no, groaned Theodore. Now I have to listen to more of George's orders.
Oh, I feel you on that one, Theodore. I'd be irritated too if I had to listen to any more of George in a single day. One minute you think you're in the clear, and the next, you're sucked right back in. Anyways, I'm more interested in knowing what Foduck found under the water. Good thing we have a watchful tug like him around. And with that, all three tugs headed to the mouth of the harbor where Foduck located this underwater thing.
I wonder what it is,
said Theodore.
I really don't know, said Foduck. It's a mystery. An underwater mystery, Theodore said thoughtfully. Well, we have to raise it up. I think I have an idea.
We'll hook it with our anchors, shouted George, swinging into action. Follow me, Theodore. Well, Theodore didn't say anything. It was no use trying to tell George what to do. Theodore, said George, butting up against him. This way.
But Foduck said it was over here, replied Theodore.
Just do what I say, snorted George. All of George's orders felt like they were building up inside Theodore's smokestack, ready to explode.
You find it yourself, George,
he said at last. Wow, George was very surprised to see everyone always did what he said.
Yeah, that's probably because no one can be bothered to stand up and tell him to back the hell off. And as we saw, this was really starting to annoy Theodore. Seriously, George, are you just waiting for Theodore to snap and beat your ass with the amount of times you're up his with your friggin' orders?
Theodore, this way.
But Foduck said it...
Just do what I say.
No, you fucking don't!
And don't you just love how this was Foduck's discovery, and then just doesn't say anything when George tries to take over? My point exactly. And due to all the frustration, now nobody wanted to help out, until Foduck received word that a big ship was coming to the harbor.
Wait, I've just received word on my radio, said Foduck, hurrying over. A big ship is heading right this way. Well, we were leaving anyway, said George. You don't understand, Foduck continued. That ship might be damaged by the underwater thing. I shall have to declare this an official harbor emergency. Now, an official harbor emergency is a very serious matter indeed.
We can't raise this thing,
said George.
We can't even see where it is.
I have a plan, said Theodore quietly.
Well, let's listen to Theodore's plan,
called Foduck.
Or we'll have to close the harbor. Well,
said George.
Okay.
But inside, he really wasn't very happy about not giving the orders.
Well, my thing is, if this is as serious as Foduck makes it out, then what the hell could possibly be down there that could potentially damage the ship? Is it a rock, or could it be some kind of explosive, maybe? Seriously, what is down there? And also, typical George getting his bumpers in a twist, all because he's not the one in charge. You know, George, you're lucky enough that the others really need your help. Otherwise, if that were me, I'd tell you to take a hike by now. Seriously, why do you have to be such a self-centered prick? And with that said, Theodore explained that his plan was to send Northumberland down below and find the underwater thing, and then have Shelburne raise it with his crane. Good plan and all, until George once again tried to give out the orders.
Northumberland, start diving,
he commanded, getting his big voice back.
Shelburne,
directed George,
start raising your crane.
Shelburne began to raise his crane, slowly.
Hurry up,
ordered George.
Northumberland, dive.
Well, Theodore knew Shelburne just couldn't be rushed. And Northumberland, well, Northumberland just hated loud noise.
Hey, my hat,
said George.
Oops. Sorry, George,
said Shelburne. George could tell that everything was going all wrong, and this time he knew why. Theodore, he said quietly, just tell me what to do. I'm ready.
And this, folks, is exactly what happens when one person feels they're entitled to just take over whenever and everything falls apart. George really has some nerve taking over a plan that isn't even his to begin with. And who would have thought just a simple lift of his hat made him realize that? Which admittingly is pretty funny. So now that George backed off and allowed Theodore's plan to continue, the hunt for the underwater mystery was underway. And moments later, Northumberland found something.
It was like nothing the sub had ever seen before. Nothing under the water or above the water either.
He found it,
shouted Foduck.
Push Shelburne this way. Pushing. Pushing!
Soon, Shelburne felt a deep thunk on the end of his line.
You hooked it,
radioed Northumberland.
We've hooked it,
repeated Foduck.
And so the tugs and Shelburne tried to raise the mystery, but the thing was very heavy. Which, by the look of it, doesn't really look all that heavy. And what even is it? Does this thing have what looks like eyes? Looks like some kind of robot or something. Well, whatever it was, it would not come up as it was caught underneath a rock, and Shelburne needed to be moved around to pull it up. And once everyone was in their proper position, the thing finally came free.
It's free, radioed Northumberland. Now, stop! Stop!
ordered Foduck.
Stopping!
Stopping! Together, with Northumberland looking, Foduck listening, Theodore and George struggling until their bumpers ached, keeping Shelburne steady. And Shelburne giving one last mighty heave of his cable, they raised the underwater mystery.
Now do we see what happens when everyone pulls together, regardless of who is giving orders? This plan practically worked like a charm. So now that this mysterious thing finally broke free to the surface, all that was left to do was figure out what it was. Turns out it was a satellite that fell from the sky and into the ocean. So this is what could have potentially damaged the ship? I mean, unless its hull is ridiculously deep enough to where it could hit it, I don't see how. Also, I'm kinda getting some flashbacks. Remember when the rocket fell from the sky in Emily and the Rocket? This seems a little similar, except this time, nobody saw it fall. So was it always there, or was this just recently? And what exactly did they do with it afterwards? It's never mentioned after all that hustle. Oh well. So the tugs finally took Shelburne back to his dock, and along the way, George was thinking long and hard about something.
I guess, he said at last, I guess I can't always give the orders. You're right, said Theodore quietly. From now on, continued George, I won't give any more orders. Well, not always, said Theodore with a little smile. Then you just wouldn't be George, added Foduck. You're right, said George with a great big grin. Let's go home. I mean, do you want to go home now? Let's go home, shouted Theodore and Foduck. George whistled his great big George whistle. Oh, it always felt great being part of a team.
And that concludes George and the Underwater Mystery. If it wasn't obvious already, I'm not really a huge fan of this particular episode. I don't hate it, but it was always one of my least favorite episodes from the Underwater Mysteries tape. It's nostalgic, sure, but there are some things that do bug me. For a story, it's an interesting concept to have a satellite be this potentially hazardous thing that could have damaged the oncoming ship, but no surprise, what grinds my gears is none other than George. As a kid, I really did not like this side of him. Almost reminded me of a Gordon James type of character, which is why George was never at first a favorite character of mine. However, at least this was a wake-up call for him to realize that whilst one may enjoy giving out orders, you can't always expect to be the one to give them or just shove yourself into whatever situation to do so. God knows what would have happened had none of them been working together to raise the satellite. At least in the end, he did understand the value and importance of working together as a team. For music, we heard mostly the normal ditties apart from one new one, that being the soft but mysterious underwater theme to really amp up the mystery and suspense. And visuals, while we do see some familiar locations, the most unique are the underwater shots. I'm not particularly sure how they did this, but it's pretty fascinating. I feel like I should like this episode a bit more, but where it stands, I'm more 50-50 on it. I can tolerate it a little more since childhood, but it does still remain as one of my least favorites from this season. Next episode is Our Boat and the Queen,